Hello and welcome back to the final edition of Living History. I'm Carol Taylor. We're going to continue our conversation with Ted Goldsborough. We left off with education, so let's pick it up right there.
All right, thank you, Carol.
Sure.
We were talking about Narberth School. I went to Arbor Junior High School for 1 year and then Lower Merion for 3 years, ran cross country. That was my only sport that I was involved with. And then I went to Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. I went there because an uncle and my sister had gone to that same college, and I was lucky to get in. Then I took ROTC during the Reserve Officers Training Corps in the Air Force. So when I graduated from Allegheny, I was a lieutenant, a second lieutenant in the Air Force. But I wanted to come to Penn for graduate school, so I got what was called an educational deferment. Every 6 months you would ask the government, please don't come and get me yet, I'm not ready. And as long as you were passing your courses at graduate school, you were okay.
Right.
But a very fortuitous thing happened after I graduated from Allegheny College. Then I met my wife in graduate school. We were both English majors at Penn, at the University of Pennsylvania. And she was from Silver Spring, Maryland. I was in the Air Force, and I decided that if I wanted to get married, being a graduate student wasn't making much money. So I thought I'd better go into the Air Force full time. So I called the Air Force, and they said, "Okay, I'm ready, come and get me." And here's a little boy from Narberth, and I was assigned to Great Falls, Montana. Put out a map to show where Great Falls is in relationship to Philadelphia. It's practically
on the other side.
3/4 away. And this is in February, so it was cold and snowy and below zero temperatures. And I spent in there, I almost got frostbite on my ears because I wasn't accustomed to protecting your ears in minus 10 degrees.
You have other areas highlighted?
Well, then I was sent in the summertime down to Biloxi, Mississippi. So I spent my winter in Montana and my summer in Mississippi. But I did get to go into New Orleans and ate at Antoine's restaurant. I got to go over to Orlando, Florida before Disneyland.
Talk about the significance of this
when
picture.
I was stationed in Biloxi, Mississippi in 1963, it was the end of, the United States Supreme Court had outlawed segregation in public places. And as a result of that, the old signs were coming down because things were changing. And this sign says colored waiting room intra-state. This is within the state of Mississippi.
Right.
The Supreme Court had said you couldn't do it from state to state. Well, Mississippi said, okay, well, we still are going to have a colored waiting room for people that are traveling in the state of Mississippi. But then they outlawed that. And I found this sign on top of a pile of scrap lumber, and I just took it and brought it home. It was at the train station. This is out on the municipal pier, this fountain reserved for the use of colored. And I thought it was interesting. Maybe someday this will be historic.
And it is history. It is part of history.
When I was in Mississippi, I thought how nice it would be, before air conditioning, to have a little motorcycle just to buzz around in, get the cool air. And I didn't want a great big machine that was big and powerful. So I got a little 98cc Perilla. It would do about 35 miles an hour. But I don't recommend motorcycles for anybody because they're pretty dangerous.
I agree with you. Okay. I'm not a big fan myself. What's this picture?
Oh, well, then I was assigned to Great Falls, Montana. After I'd started in Great Falls in the winter, I'd gone down to Biloxi, Mississippi, and then I went back to Great Falls. Susan and I are now married, and she's teaching high school English. We're living on the second floor of a nice house with Mr. Hensley and his wife and 2 teenage children, and we were up on the second floor here for about a year. I rode my bicycle to the Air Force Base, which was about 2 miles away.
And what's this?
Well, we loved Montana.
It's beautiful.
It did have the mountains and snows,
yes,
which we're going to see, but it also had lots of flat spaces around Great Falls. And it was just so different from Narberth and Ballackin.
Absolutely, you can see for miles.
You can see for miles, and you could, because the air was so dry and pure. I mean, you could look off and see maybe 40, 50 miles, as if it was, you know, it's impossible back east with all the trees and hills and that kind of stuff. One time it was 101 degrees in Great Falls, but it was very dry. I'd make the comparison like opening the oven door. But we thought it'd be fun on this hot day to go up to Glacier Park. So we drove the 56 Ford up there, and we went on Going to the Sun Highway. And it was snowing like crazy, and there were guys. I said, "You're going to have chains if you're going." And we said, "Well, we don't have our chains." So we turned around and come back and went back to the 101 degrees.
Oh, that's so funny. So tell me what this building is.
Well, this concrete building was supposedly resistant to anything but a direct hit from a bomb. This is where I worked. I was assigned to radar.
And you're still in the Air Force?
Still in the Air Force. We had our own, there's some stacks down here on the left, and those were diesel generators that generated our own electricity because we weren't dependent on getting local electricity. And I worked in what was called a blue room. The lights were all turned down so that we could watch radar screens.
Wow, wow.
Then, you know, I'm happily married. My wife's teaching in Great Falls. Everything's going fine. And the Air Force said, "You're going to have to go to Vietnam." And I'm like, we had heard bad things about Vietnam. And that was 1 week, and I get all nervous about going to Vietnam. And then they called me in, and they said, "There's been a change of plans. You're going to Baguio in the Philippines. You'll love it. It's up in the mountains. That's where the president has a summer home." And I thought, I'm so glad not to go to Vietnam. Thank you for that.
Yes.
And then a week later, they called me back in and said, "There's been a change of plan." This is the Air Force. You have your choice. You can be in Shimia, Alaska at the end of the Aleutian chain, or you can be over in eastern Turkey called Diyarbakir. Which would you prefer? And I said, "I'll take Turkey." So I went to Turkey, and I was there, and Susan stayed in Great Falls doing her teaching. No, this was a remote site, top secret. You couldn't do that. But Diyarbakir was a very old city. In fact, it had a Roman wall. It was on the Tigris River. It was an old bridge, so it was very interesting. These are some of the local men that were tarring the road. And we were in an Air Force blue United States Air Force truck. And as we were sitting there, these men started gathering around the truck. And I'm kind of nervous to know what's going to happen. They were Kurdish men. We still hear about the Kurds fighting the Turks.
Sure.
Down in the bottom photo of these two photos shows our multi-million-dollar radars, which were looking up into Russia, into Georgia, southern Russia, and then a shepherd tending his goats. So you have the contrast of something people have done for 2,000 years versus today's technology. We were feeding our signals into Colorado Springs.
Wow, wow.
When I got back, I wrote a newspaper article which appeared in the Mainline Chronicle in 1964 about a Narberth boy's Christmas in far-off Diyarbakir.
Talk a little bit about it.
Well, it was a small radar station, but you can see the old Roman walls. The city had these old walls around it. And a very interesting thing happened. On one part of the city, it was about the only part they could have done this, the city fathers knocked down the old 300 AD wall, and the city kind of exploded out into a flat land out towards our radar station. We were about 8 miles outside of town.
Right, right. I'm assuming this is when you were
the
on
young
leave, yes?
newlyweds. We'd been married. Well, we got married in '63, so we were 1 year married. I guess, let me see, in '63 I was about 64, I guess it is. I was 25 years old, and Susan was the same. We were both born the same year. And this is in Delphi, Greece. Fortunately, I had saved up my leave time when I was in Turkey, so I had over 30 days of leave time, and we traveled through Europe together.
For 30 days?
For 30 days.
Wow, wow.
Now, Carol, we're about used up our time here,
We're going to have to head into a break, but we still have plenty more to talk about.
Okay,
Plenty more.
all right.
We'll be right back after this break.